That's a good start to this morning show. Hi, I'm Jimmy Tucker, and this is going to be the first telling of a tale that I've had in mind for a while, but haven't scripted it nor presented it to myself nor you before. So, the title of this story is 3 Nights in a Cincinnati Convent with a $400 Chicago Hooker. It's of a style known as a traveling salesman story. And in fact, it's a story about being a salesman. And I will get to that title, which is literally true and absolutely misleading. So of course it's about sales. I started at 6 years old. My daddy raised me to be a salesman. And he was an insurance salesman. In the backseat of his car were little plastic measuring spoons, red, yellow, blue, green, with the company's logo stamped on them. And he gave these away to people he was trying to sell insurance to. And he was on an insurance call, and there must have been a problem with daycare or something, because I was hanging out in the car. Now, the windows were down, and it was in the shade. You know, he was not a totally irresponsible parent. But I was alone, and I was with those measuring cups. So I grabbed a bunch and went down the street knocking on doors, selling them, you know, white ones for a nickel and red ones for a dime and for a quarter. And sure enough, when Daddy comes back out, I got enough money to buy a bunch of comic books. And that was my first sales experience. Oh, look at that. That light is accidental. Whoa! But I went on from there. You see, I've sold seeds. Of course, I sold newspaper subscriptions door to door. I sold Amway. I was maybe even a preteen Amway distributor, if you can believe that. Boy, they go after you young. What else have I sold? All right, let me back up a little bit. I sold, let's just get me out of high school. So the morning after I graduated high school, I got on a bus to Nashville to become a Southwestern book salesman. That's the neighbor's dog fighting over there, don't mind that. But I went to become a Southwestern book salesman. Went up to Nashville, and I was there for not a whole week, but for a couple of days, getting trained to be a door-to-door salesman of Southwestern's books. And they had different books that they had different groups of salesmen selling. And my sales manager was a young football coach type fella, just about to graduate college. And he'd been doing this for many summers, making money to put himself through college. And that ostensibly was what I was going for. But wow, they taught me all about all these things, you know, sneaky, they are sneaky, to do to sell their books. And so I'll tell you about one experience. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, and I go up, knock on the door, and then I do what they told me is called hanging 10. So you turn your back to the door you just knocked on, and you hang your 10 toes off the steps in the opposite direction, so that the person has to open the door and speak to you about, hey buddy, why'd you knock on my door? See, and now you got the door open. So I turn around, and the lady explains to me how she can't take any time to talk to me. And after we talk there for a little while, she says, yeah, but you can't come in. And so then we're in the living room, and she says, yeah, but I got to keep doing my work. You know, if you want to talk, I'll listen. And so then I get her sat down, and she says, okay, well, I will look, but I ain't buying nothing. And I said, okay. And I show her all my books, and, you know, and as I'm taking her money and writing up her sale and getting ready to go, she thanks me for not being a high-pressure salesman. And that's the trick of it, see. Nobody responds to pressure, but everybody responds to being treated nicely. And I meant that woman no harm at all. I was young and I was naive, and I thought it was fine to get into folks' pockets like that. You know, that was, oh, you should have heard the stories I was telling to sell those little measuring cups when I was 6 years old. But that's what I thought sales was back then, is tricking people, getting them to give you money for stuff. And so I sold, after the books, sold Kirby vacuum cleaners. I got my 10 pin over that summer after high school. I sold 10 Kirby vacuum cleaners. And I sold a Kirby vacuum cleaner to an Electrolux salesman's father-in-law in the Electrolux salesman's living room. I had talked him into doing a competition. We were knocking doors, and I don't know, hormones raging. I was going to beat him. And his father-in-law shows up, and dadgum, I got his father-in-law's down payment, and I sold it in the Electrolux man's living room. And that's the kind of salesman I was. I just wanted to sell stuff. And I sold graves. Here's a good grave story. I was selling pre-need sales for Tri-Cities Memorial Gardens, Florence, Alabama. And the way the program worked is they had a boiler room, young women calling through the phone book, and Dad was going to get a free grave, and we're going to send somebody out to give you the paperwork and give you your free grave. The trick, of course, being if Mom wanted to be guaranteed buried next to Dad, they had to buy her grave then to go with this free one we gave you. And then there, of course, there's concrete vaults and, stuff to sell. And so they would make appointments for us, salespeople. And we generally have 3 appointments, of course, across the course of an evening. And the rule was that if you missed an appointment, you get closing, sometimes you really had to talk to people about dying, to sell them a grave. And you'd be late for your next appointment. Well, that didn't go back to the boiler room, you see. It was your responsibility to try to reset your own appointment. And the Green family, I had missed and missed and missed. I couldn't get them on the phone. And so one evening I was going through my list of houses I'd missed that I was trying to reset an appointment. And Mrs. Green answers the phone. And I start my standard pitch, trying to reset an appointment. And you expect people you've stood up on an appointment to be a little miffed, but Mrs. Green was not. She was very, very nice and so appreciative for me calling, Now, hey, it's going to be easy. And after a few minutes, I realized that Mrs. Green's mother is in the next room, like in a coffin, and they don't know where they're going to bury her. And, of course, at that point, I must tell you that part of our training with this cemetery in Alabama was that when we knocked on a door to give away a grave, if someone of a dark complexion answered, we were supposed to say, "Oh, I was looking for a different house," make an excuse and go away. And at this point, you must understand that Mrs. Green, of course, was black. And at that point, they couldn't play their game, you see. And Mrs. Green's mother was buried at the Tri-Cities Memorial Gardens. And of course, I didn't get a commission on that. There are no commissions for salespeople on at need. If somebody got a body, they ain't gonna pay no commissions on that. They ain't gonna discount it at all, you see. But all that family that wanted to be around the matriarch, I never met any of those people, but I got my biggest commission check of that part of my life off of that phone call. Never met anybody, but because I made that phone call, I got to sell. That's a sales story. I integrated Tri-Cities Memorial Gardens. There were actually people that dug up their relatives out of that place, and I'm kind of proud of that sale. All right, so what about, 3 nights in a convent with a $400 Chicago hooker? That is the title of this talk. So my next step in the sales business, my buddy John gives me a call. He says, I was talking to the manager of the radio station, and he asked me if I knew any salesmen, and your name came up. So I got introduced to Charles Manson. He became my mentor, Chuck, for obvious reasons. He was the general manager of WXOR, WQLT radio stations in Florence, Alabama. They were owned by Sam Phillips. Yes, Sam Phillips of Sun Records, the guy who put Elvis on the map. And Chuck had actually gone to work for these stations because Sam owned them. He had been a manager up in Chicago, and he was actually more big time than Northwest Alabama had in their radio markets. And these two stations were like bottom, very bottom, both of them, in a 10 signal market when Chuck showed up. And by golly, right after he hired me, the new ratings came out, and they were number 1 and number 2. Kind of shook things up in the Shoals area. You know, Muscle Shoals, Alabama was right there in the middle of our signal. So I had a great sales career. I mean, you know, you got the best product in town, not hard to sell. And I was a very engaging salesperson. And it was going great. I was there for a couple of years, but like a year into the program, I decided I want some real training. You know, I'd gotten real book training for the Southwestern book sales, but I hadn't had any serious radio training except the stuff that Chuck was teaching me, and he was a good teacher. But I convinced him that I just wanted to do this. The Radio Advertising Bureau, and here's where you're going to get the drift, had a sales seminar, 3 days, in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it cost $400 to attend this seminar. And the instructor was from Chicago, a guy named Jim Hooker. So that's my 3 nights in a convent with a $400 Chicago hooker. Trick, of course, being Chuck would have no part of it. He wouldn't pay for me to go. Now, I was a straight commission salesman, so if I don't go and sell, I'm, you know, giving myself a vacation. I ain't getting paid for it. But I paid the $400. I drove to Cincinnati, and I thought myself the hotshot salesman. They had sent a reading list of one book I was supposed to read before I got to the seminar in Cincinnati. And I didn't read it. I mean, I had read, you know, Zig Ziglar and, you know, all the Dale Carnegie, all this motivational sales stuff. I grew up on this stuff. And so I didn't read the book on the mailing, reading list. It turns out it was a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay. It was about transactional analysis. So I get into this class, and the minute he opens his mouth, he's like, what? You know? But after 3 days of this stuff, I've seen the light. You know? I want to do win-win transactions and actually do real communication, no bullshit. And I get home, and oh, Chuck is upset. You know? I've been spoiled. And as it turns out, in many ways I was, you know, but it stuck. But I still managed to be a salesman. I made my sales in a different sort of fashion, but sold a lot of different stuff after that. And I'm pulling up on 15 minutes, so that's a mouthful for anybody to chew on in their ear. Thank you for your attention, and we have more stories to tell in the near future. Thank you. Bye.